Hey everybody, so welcome back to Jim Bob's Garden. Alright, so today what I want to talk about is pruning your tomatoes. Now, there are two basic varieties or two basic types of tomatoes out there. There's something called Determinate and something called Indeterminate. Now, Determinate tomato primarily will grow up fairly large. They won't get as tall as an Indeterminate tomato. They'll grow up, they'll put out most of their fruit set all at once, and then once that is done, the tomato plant is pretty much done. All right, and that's a Determinate tomato. It's great for harvesting, you know, when it comes to, how do I want to say this? Like if you're trying to do a commercial harvest, I would imagine that would be better, because then you could go through your field, you could clear out all the tomatoes, send them off to market, and then, you know, start over again. There are also varieties that you may appreciate more for the taste and the texture and such, that are Determinate tomatoes. All right, and again, those would be something that would, you really don't have to prune them as much, if at all, because they're going to come up, fruit, and then they're going to be done. An Indeterminate tomato, however, is something that continues to grow until basically either something kills it because of frost or heat or what have you. So I have a couple of varieties behind me. One, I have a Roma tomato. Now, the Roma tomato is an Indeterminate variety. I know that because of the way that it grows. Now, we originally got this from compost tomatoes, basically some tomatoes that grew in my compost, and then it was a nice, tasty variety that we really like. I don't know I have no idea what kind of tomato it actually is, but it's really tasty, so we keep growing it. I just keep seeds, and then the next year I plant more seeds and I get more tomatoes. So the other variety I have over here is a Rutgers tomato. All right, so these are the Rutgers tomatoes. And they are an Indeterminate variety, and they're really good for hot, humid climates, such as Jacksonville, Florida. So that's going to be an Indeterminate, so it's going to need to be, well, both of these are going to need to be trimmed up. Now, in the past, I have done this, and I have not had the best results. So I'm going to do an experiment. I've got some other Rutgers tomatoes in other places that I'm not going to trim, and then I'm going to go ahead and trim these, and we're going to see which one seems to put out more fruit. Alright, so with that being said, let me show you how you go about trimming your Indeterminate tomatoes. Alright, so there's two things you're going to need. One is a nice pair of sharp scissors. I like my little ones because I can get into little small areas and such. And then another, if you're old like me, is a pair of glasses. So now, the first thing I do when it comes to trimming tomatoes is to try and get the lower branches off. Now, the reason I do this is I don't want anything that's going to be touching the ground like you see right here. Alright? There are various different, bacterias and fungus and such in the ground, and when your tomatoes actually touch the ground, they can easily transfer that up into the rest of the vine. So we're going to cut a lot of this back, and I usually will cut away the first foot or so of the tomato. Now this I will usually do on all my tomatoes, all right, because of the issue of it touching. And I'll show you this, so you can see that leaf there was down on the ground, and I think that's probably why it's starting to look a little yellow and looking a little rough. Now when I do this, I try and trim them back within about a 1/4 inch or 1/2 inch of the vine, that way, or the main stem I should say, because that way that gives them the opportunity to heal up that scab, and it's not directly on the main vine. Now I have tied these off, and you'll see right here where I tied this off at. Hopefully you can see that right in this area. And so I want something sticking out a bit to allow for that knot basically to hold the base of the tomato. So I'm going to cut this one out about 2 inches, and hopefully that'll stick long enough, at least for now, until I get enough of it wrapped around the plant to where it won't start to slide up and allow my tomato to fall over. Alright, so let me continue trimming here. Alright, so I want to show you this. So this is where the question comes in. So this is a classic regular branch that comes off. Alright, and then next to it you have what's called a sucker. This one here is the sucker. So right there's the normal leafing branch that would come off, and this is your sucker right here, okay? The one that's in the crotch. So the suckers will come out and produce a secondary stem. Now, if you don't want to trim your tomatoes, that's fine. That actually will produce fruit out here. Which, yeah, this one, if you look very carefully, you can see it's already starting to produce new fruit. The problem is that this will actually go outwards, and then I'll have a branch hanging over here, and it could get as large as the regular tomato plant. So, conventional wisdom says that you should trim those off. All right, and that's what we're going to try and do on this particular plant. These branches here, the main branch, which on this one I'm probably going to cut off because it is hanging down to the ground. But what would normally happen is on this main branch, like on this one here, basically that's going to provide energy for the tomatoes to grow. So you don't want to cut those off, you just want to cut the suckers. All right, so we're going to go ahead, and I'm going to trim all of this, but the sucker right here, this is what you're looking to cut off. All right, but again, this one's hanging down to the ground, so I don't want that there. So I'm going to cut that off. Now, if you're wanting to plant another tomato from your tomatoes, all you got to do is take this, cut back some of the leaves, and then just stick it in the ground, and it'll droop for a few days, but after a while, that will actually grow into another perfectly good clone of this plant. All right. So now again, over here you can see this is the main leafy branch, and this is actually a sucker. This whole big branch right here is a sucker. All right. And again, you can tell that it's starting to put out fruit. Now, if you don't mind those growing, I mean, you can keep them and it will continue to produce on that vine, but it will droop out and over, and it'll basically become essentially a secondary plant. And then up here, this is a more classic variety right here, where you have the small sucker that's just starting to come up right here. That's your sucker right there. This is your main well, your regular leafing branch. And so what you can do with these, if you don't have a pair of scissors, is you can just twist. Oh, no, that one's a little bit too big. We're going to cut that one. But normally, if they're not too big, you can just twist them off. Or like there's another one over here, which I'm not sure if you can see it, just a little baby sucker, and you can just pop them off while they're still young. All right. Now you're looking at this and you're saying to yourself, man, that's looking like it's pretty sparse compared to what it was. But that's kind of the goal of what we're trying to do here, is I want to, keep everything up off the ground, because that's where pathogens and mold and such can come from. But two, I want to primarily have the growth concentrate on these side stems here that have the flowers and will actually grow the tomatoes. So then we're just going to go ahead and wrap around, being careful not to jack up my flower stalk. And there you go. That is one well-trimmed Indeterminate tomato. Now I want to show you my little black snake here. He is amazingly unafraid. And he just cruises around, he'll check us out. Like, I'll bet you he came out here to see what I was doing. It's pretty interesting. This is all some concrete and bricks that I got from my daughter's house before she sold it. And I said, well, I'll reutilize it. Plus, it's a great natural habitat for things like the lizard you see there and the snake. See, check him out. He's like, hey, how's it going? This is a completely non-venomous snake. Wow, he is coming right up to me. Hello, buddy. How you doing? Look at him. He's cruising right by my feet. So he knows I'm not a threat. So once again, the decision to trim or not, that's completely up to you. I mean, I will tell you on my cherry tomatoes, I typically don't. I'll put them in a cage and let them just go kind of crazy, because you get a lot more cherry tomatoes, I believe, if you don't prune your tomatoes, the cherry tomatoes at least. But on this particular area here, because I have them so close and strung up, the goal is for a single stem tomato plant. And we're going to, you know, like I said, I have some Rutgers tomatoes in other areas, and I have more of the Roma tomatoes in other areas. And so I'm going to kind of experiment and see, you know, is this a good thing? Is this something I want to do, or is it not? The other thing is, with them being as close as they are, they're going to lack for sun at some point, because they're going to bush out so much that I'm going to end up with, you know, probably lower production because of the lack of sunlight created by the other tomatoes in the area. So in this particular area, at least, I am definitely going to trim them back, prune them up. And in any case, I highly recommend pruning your tomatoes up off the ground. You don't want your leaves down on the ground. That can cause all kind of issues and problems with mold and mildew and disease and such. And it also gives an easy path for, you know, bugs to crawl up onto the leaves and start munching. So I would at least recommend trimming them within the first foot or so of the ground. All right? And you know, again, this is what I do. This is how I do mine, not how you should do yours. You know, you do you, I'll do me, and we'll see. You know, this is all an experiment for me. I am not a professional. I am not a master gardener. I've never been to school on this. I'm learning as I go. But with that being said, I have done this in the past, and they have produced okay. I have not done the string method though, and for that method, it seems to me as though the best bet is going to be to trim them up to a single stem and allow them to grow in that manner, and hopefully I'll get better production from my tomatoes as they grow. Now, one other thing that a lot of people will do is pruning the tops. So up here at the top, you can see where you have the smallest area that's coming up that is going to produce the next tomato. Let me see here. So this is a good example. All right. So the main stem here comes up through here and up to there. All right. And if you was to prune out like this right here, all right, where it's starting to grow up, basically just take it and snip it off with your fingers or with a pair of scissors. What that will do is disallow this to continue to grow taller until it can find a way to go around it. And then basically what will happen is that will drive the growth further down in the stem. And a lot of people do that to make their tomatoes more bushy. I have had years where I basically grew gigantic 7-8 foot tall tomatoes, the plants, but never got any real production. And that can happen if you have too much nitrogen in your soil, and basically it just wants to grow the plant and not really the fruit. And one of the ways you can combat that, I didn't realize it at the time because I was still learning, but one of the ways you can combat that is to top your tomatoes and basically disallow more leafy growth, and that should cause them to bush more and create more fruit for your consumption. All right, anyway, that's how I'm going about pruning my tomatoes this year. You got to decide whether you want to prune them or not, but I think it's a good idea at least at the base, and then we'll see at the end of the year how well these produce and make a determination if this is something I'm going to continue to do. So thanks once again for stopping by and checking out what I got going on here in my garden. I really do appreciate the views and the viewership and you guys interacting. I love the comments. I love it when people talk to me, and we can, you know, come up with other ideas and you know, discuss how you do things and how I do things. For me, that's a very valuable and probably one of the more important things for me when it comes to why I do these videos. All right, but either way, thanks again. Do me a favor, give me a like and a subscribe, and if you haven't already subscribed, let me know what you think. Put something in the comments. I really do appreciate it. But beyond that, grow something. Get something growing in your yard. There is nothing better than homegrown tomatoes. There's nothing in the store that can even match it. All right, thanks once again. Y'all take care and come back and see me.